Hello and welcome to the How to Exchange Busy for Peaceful Productivity Masterclass. I am so excited that you are here, and I just know that if you show up to each of these videos, you apply what you learn, you're gonna see some amazing results. So I'm so excited for you. Welcome. Just a couple things to let you know before we dive into today's content. I'm going to be breaking this masterclass up into 3 videos over the course of the next few days, okay? And I'm going to do that because we all have full schedules. We are all busy or full, right? We have very full lives. And rather than try to cram all of this amazing information into an hour to 90 minutes, which can be a long commitment, I'm going to break it up into smaller 20 or so minute chunks to make it easier for you to watch the first piece of content, have a little bit of time to absorb it, process it, do a little bit of homework on it, and then come back ready for the next piece, when I drop the next video. So just so you know, that's what we're going to be doing. It's going to be 3 different parts. The 3 topics over the next 3 videos are going to be, today we're going to talk about what the difference is between busyness and peaceful productivity. What's the difference, right? The second video is going to be talking more about what is the root cause of busyness, what causes us to step into busy versus being productive, as well as kind of what gets in the way of being productive. And then step 3 or day 3, video 3, is going to be about how to take all that we've learned and then break out of the busy cycle and into productivity. So that's what you can expect to learn over the next few videos. And I'm super excited for you. Really quick, let me introduce myself for those of you who maybe don't know me very well. My name is Amanda Stout. I am a certified life coach. And what I do is I use a neuro-biblical approach to help overwhelmed Christian women step out of overwhelm, out of anxiety, and into peaceful, joyful, productive lives. Some things that I particularly specialize in are overwhelm, anxiety, as well as navigating really hard transition crisis seasons. And what I'm going to be sharing with you over the next few days, this is stuff I've learned in my own life. This isn't just, some theory. This is the practical things that I have learned and I have applied to step out of being busy and overwhelmed and anxious and really struggling into a life of peaceful, joyful productivity that is not determined by my circumstances. And what I mean by that is I've walked through a lot of really hard things. Okay. Several years ago, I used to be busy, frazzled, overwhelmed, stressed out. My house was a wreck. My relationships were a wreck. My health was a wreck. Everything just kind of was falling apart. And I learned these things and I started applying them. And now today, my home is not perfect because it's lived in, but it's organized. We have systems, we have routines, we operate in productivity. My relationships are significantly better. My health is on an upward trajectory. My mental health is night and day better. And I've been able to navigate some really challenging situations, such as the death of a child, financial struggle, health emergencies, and relationship issues without it impacting my peace. So that's just kind of a little bit about who I am and where I come from and why I'm so passionate about this topic, because this really is and was the turning point for me when I started healing. So let's dive into today's content. Today we're going to be talking about what is the difference between busy and peaceful productivity. Because on the surface, they kind of look the same. If you just look at people, they can look the same in terms of commitments and what they're doing. And people often might even use these words interchangeably, but they're actually very different. And there's a couple key things that the difference boils down to. The very first thing that it boils down to is the energy. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to explain, basically I'm going to give you some kind of bullet points of what the symptoms of busy are, how to identify, hey, a busy person looks like this. Then I'm going to give you the symptoms of productive. A productive person looks like this. Then I'm going to take a couple of those key bullet points and kind of compare and contrast them, because sometimes they can look really similar. So how do we really know which one we're operating in? Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And then we're going to end with a little bit of homework, some journaling for you. Okay, so symptoms of busy. What is busy? Busy is really typified by a very high stress, frantic energy. So if you think about it, it's like a very tight, pulled in, high strung, frazzled, chaotic energy. The busy woman has a million things on her plate and is very overwhelmed by that fact. There's just like so many things. She's very prone to talking about how, oh my gosh, I've got so much going on. I've got so much to do and I'm overwhelmed. And if you kind of think about how like the busy woman even talks, it's very much like that. Like, oh my gosh, like, oh, I'm like so overwhelmed. I've got so many things. I've got to do this and I got to do this and I got to do this and I got to do this. Right? It's just this like constant it's this frantic energy. What happens in that frantic energy is there's a million things on the plate and then balls drop, right? So she's constantly juggling things, trying to balance plates. Something falls and shatters, and then she feels super overwhelmed even more because, oh my gosh, she forgot. Oh my word, what are we going to do? Right? Like you can see the energy, right? Like I'm kind of trying to example that energy even so you can kind of see it. And it might be a little more subtle. It might not be so obvious, but that's the internal energy that's being held. The busy woman is feeling stressed all the time, frazzled, overwhelmed. Really, overwhelm is like a buzzword for the busy woman. She also feels like she can't say no. So the busy woman may often be the person that gets asked to do things a lot because she'll say yes, even if she has a really full plate. So she's going to be the one who's involved in every single activity. Her kids are in all the sports. She's in the PTA. She's volunteering at church. She's running some sort of, event. She's doing all the things and just constantly seems to be going. She might be the one that you kind of look at and you're like, oh my gosh, how does she do it all? Well, she probably isn't doing it all. There are balls being dropped, probably at home. And so, because busy can show up in the home differently. Sometimes the busy woman will show up privately a little bit differently than she shows up in public, because here's a really, really core thing. The busy woman, her self-value and self-worth fluctuates based on what she accomplishes in a day or in a season. So rather than operating from a sense of like sufficiency, that and knowing like I am who I am, I'm trusting the Lord, I'm following the Lord, I'm sufficient in Christ's sufficiency, and I'm gonna just do what he has me do. The busy woman might believe that in theory, but in practicality, she really ties her worth to what she gets done. So on a day that she's on top of it, she didn't drop any balls, she got all the laundry done, it's all put away, kids got to places on time, she did XYZ, checked off her list, she's feeling really good about herself. On a day that she didn't get a lot done, maybe the house is a wreck, she was late, things happened, blah, 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 she's going to feel really down on herself. Her self-value fluctuates based on what she accomplishes. It's based on what she does rather than who she is. Okay, so that's kind of an identity thing, and we'll talk about that more in the next video when we talk about root causes of busyness. But that's a huge piece of busyness, is if you notice that you have a tendency to, if you don't get everything on your to-do list accomplished in a day, you have a tendency to beat yourself up and really feel down on yourself. That's a really big indicator that you're operating in busy. Another thing with the busy woman is that she often can feel resentful, and she might not want to admit it, but it's there. There's this kind of resentment deep down because she's committed to things that she doesn't actually want to do. But she said yes because she felt like she had to, either out of guilt or obligation, or wanting to be approved, wanting to feel like she has it all together. And so she feels resentful because she's doing things she doesn't actually want to do. And that also can then lead to feeling resentful because she feels like her needs and her wants are never prioritized. And this isn't to say that we need to live selfish lives, but it's important that we also have our cups filled sometimes. And so the busy woman really, like, very rarely, if ever, takes the time to fill her own cup. She's constantly pouring out and she's constantly running on empty. So those are a lot of the key symptoms of busy. All right. So what about productivity? What's the difference? Some key symptoms of productivity, how to tell about productivity, is that number one, the energy. Productivity is based in a grounded, calm energy. If you think about it, it's almost like just taking a deep breath and it's just relaxed. Like, I want you to think about, if you noticed my body language as I was even describing busy energy versus right now as I shift to talking about productivity, my very body is more relaxed and it's more open and it's calmer and more peaceful. And that's because I'm intentionally putting myself in these states, these energetic states, to model it for you, because you kind of have an idea of what it looks like. So productivity is a calm, grounded, peaceful energy. The number of things on the to-do list might be the exact same, and this is why sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. The busy woman and the productive woman might have the same number of things that they have to do in a day or a week. Or even the productive woman might sometimes have more. But she approaches her tasks from a calm, grounded approach that is based on priorities and values, as opposed to obligation. The productive woman, her self-value stays stable. Her confidence, her identity, her self-worth, her self-value stays stable day to day. It does not depend on what she accomplishes in a day, but rather she is able to accomplish things in a day because she's operating from that grounded energy. And that really, those are some of the key differences. Again, some of the actual specific things of being involved in sports or volunteering or a co-op or whatever could be the exact same, but the energy with which she shows up is different. So let's compare and contrast this a little bit more clearly, right? Where you have frantic energy with busyness, with productivity, you have a grounded energy. And I like using the word grounded because frantic, I think, is pretty obvious, right? It's this frantic, chaotic, high stress. Grounded doesn't mean, it means that there's this level of stability, this kind of foundation that the productive woman operates from. It doesn't mean that she doesn't sometimes get really excited about something. She can still be bubbly and energetic and happy. But there's this groundedness, this kind of foundational stability to her emotions. She has much more emotional stability. The crazy list of a busy woman, her list is busy, it's crazy, it's chaotic because it's based on the tyranny of the urgent. And so a busy woman's to-do list is dictated not by her, but by the tyranny of the urgent, by trying to put out fires, by what's being put on her by the outer circumstances and by other people. And so she's kind of being constantly pulled in 5 million different directions because, especially if she has a family and children and work and all these different things, what thing's more urgent right now? So she's constantly doing things, but at the end of the day doesn't necessarily feel like she's accomplished much because she was constantly putting out fires as opposed to actually accomplishing projects and tasks that she wanted to do. Whereas the productive woman, her list is very intentional. She has curated her list, and it could be the same length. It has nothing to do with the length of the list. Again, it has to do with the intention of the list. It's an intentional list that has been thought through, prayed through, and specifically selected based on values, priorities, and goals that she has. Now, it doesn't mean that she's rigid in that. If something comes up, she assesses in the moment, okay, how does this fit in? If there is an urgent matter, she deals with it, but not from the chaotic energy of like, oh my gosh, how am I going to fit this in? But more in like, oh, this came up. I wasn't expecting this. I'm going to be flexible and see, okay, is it important? Is it something I need to deal with? Is it in line with my values and priorities? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, here's how I'm going to rearrange my list. She's much more intentional with how she operates. Busyness is pressure. It feels heavy. It feels pressure. It feels constricting and stressful, and is often based on perfectionism. There's pressure because there's pressure to perform well and to be perfect and show up a specific way. And so because we're not perfect and we're never going to show up perfect, the busy woman is constantly feeling this pressure and even condemnation and constantly saying yes to things to try to prove that she can do it and it's okay and that she's okay. Whereas the productive woman has permission to say yes and no. She gives herself permission to say yes and no to whatever it is based on what is important in the moment and what her values are. Busyness operates out of obligation and people pleasing. That's a huge one. Busyness really, that's where a lot of the can't say no comes in and where the overwhelm can come in, because basically what happens when you're operating in busy is you tend to operate in people pleasing. And so instead of making choices that are intentional and you have control over your calendar and your to-do list, you're letting everyone else's, whether it's your husband or your boss or your kid's teacher or church or whatever, you're letting all these other voices dictate to you what you can and cannot do in a day. And you run into that and you say yes to things out of obligation, or you say no to things you actually want to do because you feel obligated and guilty or whatever. And again, with the people pleasing, you're trying to make everyone else around you happy. Whereas the productive woman makes choices based out of her values, goals, and priorities. She has clearly defined values, goals, and priorities, and she makes decisions based on that. Not based on other people's opinions, but based on what is important to her. And she's taken the time to seek the Lord in establishing what are these values, priorities, and goals for me in this season. But she makes decisions in alignment from that, not from what other people want. Busyness is often rooted in a fear of rejection or a fear of abandonment and a desire to feel accepted by an external source, a desire to feel worthy and loved and accepted by people outside of us. Whereas productivity is operating from a clear, grounded sense of self-value, of knowing I know who I am in Christ. I know who I am as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, as a whatever, right? What my identity is. I know who I am. I know the value I have because of Christ. I know my worth. I know my value. And I'm going to make choices in alignment with what I know the Lord is asking me to do right now and what I feel called to do right now. And other people's rejection or affirmation is not even part of the picture. So really what a lot of this boils down to is that busyness is rooted in fear, and it's Satan's yoke. It's taking Satan's heavy burden, heavy yoke of condemnation, of shoulds, of trying to find our worth and our fulfillment in things outside of the Lord, and partnering with that and allowing the enemy to weigh us down with that. Whereas productivity is rooted in faith and is operating under Jesus' yoke. See, busyness is heavy. It feels heavy. It feels constricting. It feels tight. It feels heavy. Productivity feels open and light because it's Jesus' yoke. And you know what? We have that promise. If you've been listening and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally can see that. I've totally been operating busy. I see it. I feel it. I feel that heaviness. I feel that tightness, that constriction. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Cast your burdens upon me. Take my yoke upon you, for it is light. That is what he promises, right? Take my yoke upon you, because it is easy and light, and I will take your burdens. Jesus promises that. So we can go to him and we can say, Jesus, Lord, I've been operating in busy, in burden, and I don't want to anymore. Please take it and give me your yoke that is easy and light. And he'll do that. Okay? He totally will. But we have to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to go pick up the busy yoke, because that's what we tend to do. God doesn't put it on us. We have a tendency to go pick it up. We'll give it to him, and then we'll go pick it back up. So we're going to talk about that over the next couple days, how to not pick it back up, okay? But that is the difference between busyness and productivity, okay? So that is the core kind of concepts that we're talking about today. So homework for you today, I have them in the description. I have a journal prompt for you. I want you to take a look at everything that I just shared with you in terms of busy versus productive, those symptoms, and assess, where do you land on that? Where are you, busy or are you productive? And using maybe a 1 to 10 scale, with 1 being you're operating in busy like 99.9% of the time, and 10 being you're operating in productivity 99.9% of the time, where on the scale would you put yourself in operating in busy versus productive? So journal that and share it with us. Share it in the comments. Another thing that you can start working on, if you'd like, is I have a free printable worksheet, or it's not a worksheet. It's a list of questions that you can then use with a journal to work on. And it's questions to help you establish, what are your personal priorities, values, and goals? What matters to you? And I would encourage you to go download that. You can start working on it now. You can also just download it and save it for later, because you definitely are going to want to work on it after our next couple of videos, and I'll address it then as well. But on my website, I'll put the link in there. It's totally free. It's a free download. You can print it. You can just have it on your computer, whatever. But that is a list of questions to help you kind of identify what matters to you. So that's your homework for today. Please go do that. Share in the comments what any ahas or any or where you land on the busy to productive scale. And I will see you in our next video.